Cool.
the famous permission, pressing that. Hi, Joey. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Nice to talk to you.
Likewise, I've actually obviously liked your work for a long time, but came to it in a very weird way. You know, most people it's oh, in school I had to watch, Shakespeare this or something other. Mine was my best friend in college would ad nauseum watch my How to Kill Your Neighbor's Dog.
Really
Love
funny.
that movie for some reason.
Oh, funny, funny. Well, I
Like,
like that movie, but it
oh,
was
it's
one of the many that I've done that have been seen by four people. But I'm very glad that you're one of them.
oh, two. We got because my friend was the second one. He would be watching it so often. There was something about like being like 21 and the misanthropy of it all that just like that's what life will be. And it's just been fun to see, like, I think people for so many years had a perception of you of like, oh, he does, very stodgy, stiff upper lip stiff. And then to watch you, like, especially this year on the campaign trail, like your interview with Mark Maron it's manic and funny and just like, oh, this is the person who's behind all that. It's so fun to see.
Yeah, oh, well, thank you. Well, it's something about this project, and but also the lockdown. I think really encouraged a lot of people to live now, and find that this time that we have is precious, and we don't know when life is going to sort of change dramatically as it has done for all of us across these last couple of years, and it certainly did for me back at the beginning of the story that is the film of Belfast, and so even telling that story is about sort of reconnecting with parts of yourself that maybe actually in some ways were begun then. I feel as though what that experience in Belfast did for me all those years ago as a 9-year-old, it just made me. I think it put me and a lot of people on high alert and made us really quite guarded, quite protected, and I think come the beginning of the lockdown, it suddenly felt like, you want to drop all that because, life is now graphically, confined and shorter. So for me, that it's been a releasing thing.
Oh yeah, totally. And then just when do you decide that you want to tell the story? Because obviously it's been in you forever. And as you get older or just live your life, different parts of it come into more focus. I know, everyone has the thing where it's like, oh, as a kid, that was super important. It's not anymore. But now I want it again. Like there's weird like books that I want now because I read as a kid and I just want to have them. Like when do you know I have to tell this story because of that? Like just to recapture it.
Well, I think in my case, it was when I overcame the Belfast DNA staple, which is don't blow your own trumpet, never get above yourself. Um, so therefore, for quite some time, you're not sure that your story is worthy of telling out in the big wide world. But I heard so many other stories from people who had in their own lives a kind of displacement. They had a very graphic sense of the moment before they lost what you might call innocence, or you might just say was their entry into the world of adulthood and all the cynicism that comes with it, where you literally put away the childish things like the books you're talking about. And without sentimentality or nostalgia, I wanted to go back and I wanted to see that 9-year-old because I think, some of the mad, Mark's podcast or whatever is part of the 9-year-old, a sort of lunatic Irish thing that was very energized and very, you're free, very open, and also it's part of living in a loud society with a lot of people. You're out in that street in Belfast, you're in that large family, you had to be heard. And one of the impacts for me of leaving that place was to become a much more quiet and introverted person on the whole, even though my job became the opposite of that. But it did so with the, people assuming certain things about me, which are perfectly fine, but wasn't the whole package. So I wanted, like you, not to go back and get the books. I wanted, in a way, to go back and get the humor. I wanted to go back and get the silliness. I wanted to go back because there was a silliness that was, forged in a time of extraordinary difficulty for so many people. So if you could have access to that which you had access to in the darkest of times, it seemed to me it'd be a great thing to have when you're a 60-year-old man.
I would imagine. Yeah, I mean, like when I was a kid, being loud was a thing the adults did. Like I was loud in my own way, but like my grandfather talked to strangers and
Right.
you weren't supposed to. And I so vividly remember being in junior high school or high school and just being in the elevator, and you used to not talk to strangers, and somebody like just started talking to me about the weather, and I kind of like did that, and I realized, oh, there's a point where you're no longer a child, you're an asshole because you're not talking to strangers, and nobody tells you when. You just sort of realize, oh, I've crossed. And
Yeah.
and that's something that I think, the movie speaks to without ever specifically having that moment. Like you never see the grown-up character, which I think is a great choice. But you know that as they leave, like something has changed, and some of it's for good, some of it's for worse, but this is not the same person anymore.
No, and in a way, that moment isn't there because it's a sort of cumulative assumption of
Yeah.
that moment. I do think that the look that young Buddy gives on the bus as he moves away and looks back at his grandmother, that carries, because the story is suggesting it as well, but it carries this idea of, wow, the changes that are going to come, the sort of, that's, you put a lot of stock in a garden you can play football in,
Yeah.
as the big sell on this departure. I think you're going to find that isn't punching, that full weight as a great sort of treat. So yeah, that slow. What I found at that time that this lockdown has made me want to kind of shake off is this feeling that from the moment that riot happened and that appalling period in the history of the North of Ireland happened, everybody was on, code red, high alert. You just cortisol and adrenaline levels were like through the roof, and some of that legacy has stayed, I think. And so understanding how it occurred, and to some extent in the doing of it, dismantling it in the residue that it exists, was an important personal thing. But I wanted to tell it partly because I'd encountered so many more stories across my life of other people's displacement, or other people's, it's a very interesting way of putting it, talking to strangers in elevators. When do you get to the point when you do that because it might be a kind thing to do, or it might be something curious and interesting for you to do, as opposed to something you need to protect yourself from?
Yeah.
It's an interesting crossover moment.
Oh yeah, and I think to what you're saying, that breaking down these things that have been in not just your life, but an entire people's lives for a generation now, speaks to how well the movie works, because it's so specific, but is also telling such a universal feeling in the story that, I've lived in Brooklyn my entire life, but I know that family and I know that character, and you respond. I've told everyone who listened, like, to me, this movie is like being hugged for 90 minutes, and just, you don't always want to be hugged, but you need it. And there's something about the warmth of it.
Well, I really appreciate that. I mean, some of the most rewarding, that's a very rewarding thing to hear, because in a way, we wanted to go back there without wallowing in cheap and easy sentimentality, but in a sort of necessary warmth, in a necessary compassion, a needful and vital compassion. And, some of the most rewarding reactions I've had, I can think of three. One was in the dark, as the credits were rolling at Telluride, when we played the film to an audience for the very first time, and a woman came up to me and she couldn't speak and she was crying, and eventually she just sort of half whispered, "I'm a grandmother," and then she went on her way. This was very moving to me. She couldn't say why it was important, other than that qualified her for that reaction. And then an Iranian female filmmaker I met at the London Film Festival, who came to see it, who just came up and said, "That's my story." It's as simple as that. A woman, and from Iran, but displacement. When the displacement of people that went on in August of 1969 in Belfast was the greatest number in any city since the end of the Second World War. I mean, it wasn't nothing. It was a big deal. On that very same day that our story starts, 3 streets away, a Catholic boy my age at that time was killed. So, the necessity then and now to, in the face of what the world can sometimes offer, to celebrate simple but not necessarily simplistic things, connections between people is I think very important.
Right. The even just the dialogue, like, I'm sure you are pulling from real life, but also you're a creative person. You know how to write a movie. The things that feel right, whether they happened or not. There's, like, for me, the 2 lines in the movie are obviously Jamie getting to say, like, if you're a kind person, you're welcome in my home. It's such a, like, summary of what we should aspire to. But even just the grandfather saying, you know, I'm not going anywhere, you won't find me. And it kind of like went over my head the first time. It was just a great grandfather line. But I took my girlfriend to see it because I wanted to see it a second time. We were actually in Florida, like a completely random place to see a movie about Belfast. But that second time, like I got the, like goosebumps on your arm, like, oh, that's about something I just didn't get the first time. And I was thinking about my grandfather at the time. And like you said, subtle and simple, but not simple to the people involved is what makes this so special, that it puts them in your shoes in a way, which is almost impossible to do.
Well, one of the things that again has been very rewarding is people feeling as though that reality that you're talking about is there in the dialogue and in the performances. And people have asked me why was I able to sort of come up with that? Well, it was a question of memory, you know. So as you rightly imagined, so much of it came directly from people. And I really, really remember that. I mean, you know, some of it is inspired by, but some of it is actual. And certainly that last moment in the hospital with my grandfather and my father was very, 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 very vivid, as is also the stuff that you don't have to say. I'll never forget being, sent to that pub to knock on the door and point. It's or even then I was aware of, oh my God, this is, as soon as this door opens and my father sees me, yeah. I'm 10 at the door of the pub. There's only one reason I'm there. And I must say, I think Jamie Dornan sort of does the impossible in a reaction, because it's so multi-layered. I remember thinking, my father, his heart must be breaking that I'm having to do this. Yeah. I'm here, and it's here. It's in a pub. There's nothing glorious about it. It's just, it's just, but it's somebody, he needed to be told. We didn't have television. There's no mobile phones, blah, blah, blah. It's just, that's the way it is.
Yeah. And just the fact that you don't linger. There's like one shot of just where you would have been, but it goes to the next moment, which is how life is. Like, so much of it is a memory, like, in life. Like, I'll look at my home is littered with my grandfather's clocks, like, just, he loved clocks or watches. I'll see that and I'll get a moment. Or like, my dog loved him, but my dog loved everyone. So like, why is that different? But it's different because you feel it. And it's the thing that, like, you can't explain to someone. You just know it's true. But then suddenly you have a movie that can explain it. And that's insane to me. It's an extraordinary achievement.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I think somehow the combination of those people as well. Kieran Hines grew up half a mile from me. He knew these people. He met people like my father and my grandfather. Katrina Balfe lived in a border town that was so volatile. That's my dog talking about dogs. That's my dog telling me.
My dog interrupted Jamie for like 5 minutes earlier, so it's fine.
So I know what he's after. Begins with the word PLAY. They knew, they were very familiar with that world. And you used the word economy, and sort of brevity. So much was said. I remember my dad later in life was going to work with a big movie star, and my dad didn't care for him. I said, "Why don't you like about him, Dad?" He said, "I think he's forgot himself." And he had that way of, and I had to think about it for a while, but it's a great, neat phrase. I think he's forgot himself. From his point of view, that was like he's given up his reality, his identity, his authenticity. It was totally key to my father, and he didn't approve of him losing it. This is Jack, by the way, here.
Hi. Okay. Benny is off in the distance somewhere, my dog. But you speak, what you say is so true, because my grandfather was a projectionist, so he literally ran the movies. And he was a union official afterwards, and he would go to these events, and he would tell a story. He met James Gandolfini, and he went, "Do you want an autograph?" Like, "No, but I'll buy you a drink." Like, that was the same thing. Like, I don't care who you are, but it's cool that you're here. You want a drink? I don't want anything from you. Yeah, and great. That's I think what made it so relatable also for me is, like, we have an age difference, we have where we're from is different, but like, the feeling of, that's my grandfather, he's a unique character, I will miss him.
Yeah,
That is
yeah.
just it's so there. And that's, I guess, the easiest way to end it is to say thank you. Like, I love this film, but also I got to experience something that I can't explain, like so many others have told you.
Well, I really, really appreciate that. And I think one of the things behind that is that when I wrote the screenplay, I didn't have any clear idea that I was going to make a film. I wrote it and showed it to my brother and sister and said, "What do you think? If you don't like it, if you don't approve of this, I won't do it." But I needed to write it. So it started from a place of sort of a natural place of need that could have stopped in a script that sat in my bottom drawer. As it happened, they encouraged me to take it out, and in so doing, it's connected with people. So I'm very thrilled to hear what you're saying and very grateful. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
it's my pleasure, and you deserve all the awards that are still to come and have already come. And it's just great to see that, like, especially something that was made during like a COVID period, where it's the least personal way to make a movie is the most personal movie. It's an achievement. I think if nothing else came of it, you should be very proud, but that's not what's going to happen.
Well, thank you. Well, we are proud and we are grateful, and whatever happens, we're grateful right up to this point. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Likewise, feelings mutual. Thank you so much for doing this.